I'm gonna take a wild guess that sometimes you feel worthless. I sometimes feel worthless. It's the nagging feeling that people around you really don't care about you, that they resent you, but also that the world is both completely indifferent about me, but still somehow rejects me. And of course, there are multiple legitimate political and socio-economic reasons to worry and to feel this way. Because the prospects of the world have never seemed so grim when you see that we're all fighting each other, while there are so many crises everywhere you look. The housing crisis, a crisis of climate change, a war raging that might expand into the rest of the world. So, I kinda get you. Well, the whispers of the nagging voice in the back of your head isn't wrong to feel. You might even be tempted to agree with it. But in this video, I'm going to try to show you how the world and the societal structures that we create for ourselves uniquely intertwine to create a fully empty experience for you to live in. And that is probably partly why you feel worthless right now. And to do so, you need to fully understand the powers that are at play and that work on you. And in order to protect ourselves from the worst parts, you need to have a radical acceptance of the bad parts first. So let's make you feel a little bit worse before it's gonna get to feel better. Step 1 of my mission to make you feel a little bit worse is to reframe your feeling of worthlessness into a kind of cosmic humility. So think about it like this. We live on a planet Earth. Our planet Earth is one of millions of planets that we only know a handful of within our own solar system. With our own solar system is within a galaxy of which there are thousands that we can observe and theorize about, but that we would never be able to explore in our lifetimes. The universe is so incredibly vast that our Earth, which for us is our entire lives and our entire futures, is this eensy-weensy droplet into the vast ocean of the universe. And, well, so is human life itself. Human life in the form of Homo sapiens in the evolutionary chain that we talk about right now has been around for around 300,000 years. Then recorded history about the things that we read about and study is 5,000 years. Which is still a lot of time compared to our lives that if you're lucky, you'll probably live to 100. It's easy to count. So, what is 100 years within 5,000 years of recorded history, 50 times, within the span of the 300,000 years that Homo sapiens has been around, within the span of millions and millions of years that our planet has been around, which could still be considered quite a new planet within how old the universe is, in orders of magnitude older. So the problems that we experience at any given day, in any given year, is infinitesimally small. It is so small, in fact, that it might seem insignificant whatever you're struggling to get up in the bed in the morning. That's because of this. That is not to say that our problems as humanity right now are insignificant, and that we might as well just resign to our fate because it doesn't mean anything on a cosmic scale. Because we're facing climate change, we might all go up in flames and there won't be any future to speak of. But that also doesn't mean even that your problems in particular are insignificant. They very well might be, and I'm guessing lots of them are insignificant. But this logic doesn't hold up to make you feel worthless. Because if you zoom out far enough and you go back and back and back, you wouldn't be able to distinguish the Mona Lisa from any speck of dust, or from the Scream, or from a statue, or from a random meme you found on the internet. So you need to find a balance, because for life itself to mean anything, you cannot zoom out too far to a universal level, because then yes, your life would be completely worthless. But on the other hand, what we tend to do is, because we have the unfortunate circumstance of living in our own bodies and being observer to our mistakes firsthand, we zoom in too far, so that we overanalyze every detail of the problems that we're experiencing and racking our minds over it and feeling really bad about it. But that's completely unnecessary. You need to find a level between the world and the microscopic details of your problem, because the moment you can distance yourself from the problem itself, you might start to feel a lot better or less pressure from those problems. To fight the blind zoom to think about life is that you mean absolutely nothing to the world, and in all likelihood you will never mean anything in history. And that's fine. But that's also the wrong zoom level to think about it. In more optimistic terms, you might mean nothing to the world, but you might mean the world for those around you. That's our starting point for hopefully you feeling a little bit less worthless. But of course, it's still very easy to fall prey to the pressures of the systems that we live in our society. Think about capitalism and the social systems that we live in, because all of these create expectations of how we are supposed to behave, the roles that we should play. Think about gender roles. Think about the role that you're supposed to play in your family, towards your friends, as a man, or even to general peers if you think about beauty standards. And so, with all these expectations that are somewhat overlapping or contradicting, it's easy to feel like you are not living up. So if you have that feeling that you are not the person that you are supposed to be, that's because you're not. Not because you're just a big failure, but because of these expectations. But I've already made a video about that, and I will talk about it continuously throughout the channel, so I'll link a video up here. There are so many overlapping and contradicting expectations within society that make sure that you feel like you're not living up to them. That's because you're not. These expectations then, they constrict everyone in that group equally. So men's gender roles constrict all men equally, or everyone that will fall within the group of men. And all of them feel the same pressure. So think about men's beauty standards. Not that I would know a lot about that, but think about it with me for a second. Being tall and muscled is usually something that is considered to be attractive. Therefore, it's a universal beauty standard. And then some people win the genetic lottery and therefore are naturally more beautiful or charismatic in these standards that we held. And they wouldn't have to do much. But especially when we talk about being muscled, that's something you can work on. So if you go to the gym, which is a thing that of course is good for many reasons, you go to the gym in order to become muscled and to strive to adhere to these expectations so you can maybe be happy. With all of these pressures, you might feel some relief in pursuing and conforming to the standard. So you'll be the one-eyed king in the land of the blind. But ask for women example. Ask all the most beautiful supermodels in the world that we have designated to be beautiful. If you ask these women that whether they are still insecure, even though they might be very close to ideal with the beauty standards, they will still be heaping bags of insecurity. Because even when you're that close, I guess, to an impossible standard, you will still feel like you're not living up to it and you're not good enough. So with all these expectations, it's not just that you feel worthless, you are made to feel worthless by these impossible standards. So let's dive into some of these expectations, and we'll start with expectations of people. Let's start with men. Men are supposed to be strong. At least that was what we're taught when we were growing up as men and socialized in society. We're supposed to be strong and stoic, and we don't talk about emotions because that's what girls do. So, in economic terms, that translates that men have traditionally been the breadwinner of the household and women would stay home. Traditional gender roles, right? So if we fail to do so because the economy is in shambles, all of a sudden we feel emasculated. And it can also put a lot of strain on the relationship for some men that feel this pressure if their significant other makes more money than they do. You also have that men are supposed to be dominant and assertive and full of personality and also funny and disciplined. And in the dating world, the more of these kinds of expectations start stacking up, the more difficult it is to live up to them, and the more you'll feel inadequate, and it can build a lot of resentment if these standards aren't met. Oh yeah, and don't forget tall, because apparently it's very important to be above 6 foot. That's a very important one, but it's not something you could really work on, I'm sorry. Women, on the other hand, are supposed to be pretty and sexy. They're supposed to be nurturing and caring, and they've traditionally been in the background of men. So the roles that society ascribes to them have, for the majority of history, unfortunately, been just of a mother or a wife, so a proxy. But they are taught to cook and clean and not to speak up too much. Fortunately, also other expectations that come with it that we don't directly understand as men is that you are taught to hold back and not be too affectionate, because you might give off hints, and if you give off hints to someone and something bad happens, you were kind of asking for it. You were sending mixed signals. And so women have to go the route of protecting themselves from men, which apparently is their job, and they wouldn't go out alone at night, so they have to cycle home with friends, and they need to be able to be accounted for at all times, like by saying to a friend before a date that, oh, I'll be at this place. So women have to also take safety precautions. It's not a bashing of men only. It's this expectation that women need to not give off hints and therefore have to protect themselves screws men up just as much as it does women. Because men then, the good men, so to speak, they will face women that are generally more hesitant to be open and trusting towards you, because you might never know the physical threat that you might impose if you wouldn't get your way. I'm not saying that you would pose that, but that's something that women have to take into account, unfortunately. And I know, men, that you have faced this safety precaution firsthand, unfortunately, because I remember that when I go out on the street, because I'm tall, I've got a black coat, and in the dark you wouldn't distinguish me from maybe a mugger, I don't know. But if I walk behind a woman at night on the street, I can feel this palpable tension. Of course, it's in my mind, but this is a social expectation. I feel this palpable tension that I shouldn't walk behind her for too long. I might even cross the street to avoid her having the idea that I might do something bad. But generally speaking, the social expectation for women to have to take care, which is not very good for them, it also puts us men into awkward positions, because we don't want to make them feel that way, but this is just how society functions. But this is kind of what we're missing in politics, right? When we talk about gender norms in particular and gender roles that we play, is that we cannot take one expectation in isolation, because it always has a reflection that screws over the other side just as much. The idea that men have to make the first move and pursue women in relationships might seem noble and heroic, but it puts very much a strain on men to go out of their comfort zone and be rejected a lot, which puts a lot of strain on men. But it also means for women that they aren't, when they speak out and when they pursue a man, they're seen as overconfident, or maybe even like a B word. So all of these expectations, they screw over both sides, and you have to understand that no one's really happy with it, but some people might be better at it. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't change it. Let's go to immigrants. Immigrants are supposed to be model citizens, and I think Asian people of all stripes can attest to this. Because you're supposed to not cause any trouble. You're a guest after all, so even though you're contributing to your community by paying taxes, you'll never truly belong. So the guest analogy would not work, because even if you are paying rent, well, it's still not your place and you could be deported at all times. Because believe me, if you get into any trouble, it will be in the headlines of the local paper and people will frown upon you. So you're expected, social expectation, to assimilate into a community that you'll never truly belong in. You'll have to leave behind the parts of you of another culture potentially, even though you never had those parts, but you'll never truly be part of the in-group. But this also extends to concepts themselves. If we think about what success looks like, well, success is about being rich in wealth. So you need to be rich and respected and being on the top of the hierarchy alone. It's a lonely existence, because you can be admired but never truly loved. You have to do it yourself and you have to keep up appearances. keeping up with the Joneses. You need to be sensational, otherwise you'll be fading into irrelevance, and so you need to be entertaining. Because you're not a person. You're not a full person can be flawed, that can make mistakes, because our culture only sees you as like this object of aspiration. But you need to be on top of it at all times. You need to be a perfect model citizen instead of a real person. Not that I would know anything about being successful, but it's just what people say that are usually successful and have any capability of self-reflection. Or take something as simple as a career path. You're seen to be you're born and you go to school and you need to get good grades in order to get into good universities, having good jobs, have a stable job in order to provide for your family. So start a family, have some kids maybe, and then retire and die. Right? Stable career path. Or think about love and relationships. There is the expectation that in your prime, you have to find a partner, and a partner that you can be proud of, a partner that is compatible, someone that you can bring back to the family, and then you can have a happy family by settling in together, maybe getting married first, and do the things that adults do when they love each other very much. At least that's what I've been told. And that same thing, doing the thing that adults do when they love each other very much, we have the expectations around that it's exclusive to this one person, and that intimacy in general, so not just that, but intimacy in general is more restricted to this person, so we become more hesitant to be more intimate with our friends, like being more touchy, giving better hugs, etc. when we have a partner, because they might become jealous. And jealousy itself is a symptom of an expectation that makes you feel like you're losing someone. But it does not necessarily. It's tied to how we even view intimacy. So we also care about how normal showing affection is, or how to show that affection. What is normal in that department? For example, like bringing flowers for anniversaries, remembering anniversaries, because aliens might not even consider it important that why would you celebrate an arbitrary amount of time, like a year, and have certain rituals that you do as a result. But think also about the idea that we need a relationship to be whole in the first place. Just like I talked about, think about friendships themselves. The expectation that there are no male to female friendships after a certain age, or at least after one of them gets in a relationship, because otherwise it's weird. Like, kids get grown up quite quickly around the teenage years, that even though the girls that they've been playing around with for a long while, all of a sudden they're yucky. So with the friendship, you don't want to be with a male to female friendship when you're at a certain age, because it might be awkward, or you might give them the wrong ideas. Why need them at all, right? Because you have your partner. Also expectations about how close you can be with the homies, or how many homies is a good amount of homies to have, or how many times that you need to see someone in order to even consider them a friend. Do you need to see them outside of the context of where you met them, like work or school, or whether online friends could be considered friends at all, or the expectations around friendships themselves, like whether they need to be in a similar age bracket, have similar interests and hobbies, and what is able to be talked about with friends at all. And of course, all of these things make it easier to talk to someone and become friendly with them. But it's also the truth that because of our expectation that these things is what constitutes a friendship, it makes it easier to make that connection in our social world too. And the biggest one of all, I think, is about the expectations that we have around the word normal. In the Netherlands, there's a saying, is just act normal, then you're weird enough. Which brings a restrictive idea of what normal means, which means you shouldn't really stand out too much. As a society, we're expected to be full of personality and not be too weird, which again, eyes of a beholder. You have to be for a team in order to belong and have like opinions about stuff. You need to dress well and not too bombastic. For women, of course, it's different, because if you dress well, already value loaded, you can Otherwise, you can be seen as attention-seeking. And for men, it's even weird to dress well at all because men don't really have that much variety in clothing. So wearing a color that really makes a statement, like a bright pink, all of a sudden makes you stand out and not be normal anymore. So adhering to all of these standards, and I've mentioned only some parts, but hopefully comprehensive enough for you to get the idea, conforming to all of these standards might be relieving for a while, and you might actually be really good at it, but you'll never be able to succeed, and it's the ultimate curse. We want to find meaning in a world that is discouraging of that meaning. That's the curse. I think that we all forge the strongest bonds with people that we love, and that is where the true essence of life lies. That is where meaning is. But in the way that we think about success in our society, in our Western society, is that we live in a world where we admire the self-made people, the billionaires, the self-funded, the self-sufficient, the strong people. We aspire to be them. For them, getting to the top, doing it yourself, never really asking for help. And success here, therefore, is directly opposing to the idea of finding meaning in forging connections with others. But also, the idea of being self-made is a lie on its face. And we worship these people. But think about it. For one, everyone in society has helped them get to the top. Not only is there no pyramid, and can you not be on the top if there are not people below you? So they wouldn't mean anything if there wouldn't be people that either worked for them and they have used in order to get to the top. But they've also benefited inevitably from services and things that we all help keep up. Think about them having been, for example, to public schools that we all help pay for, learning the knowledge and therefore getting to a point that you can even start a business. Then you have a business, and then you need a legal framework in a society to even operate. That means that your assets are protected, which again, the law is something that we all help keep up. Or if your business has goods that require trucks to drive over roads, that everyone in society help to keep up with the taxes that we pay. So it all comes back around. But even the connections that people have, or the wealth that's been passed down by them, by their parents sometimes, these are also things that are not directly credited, but it's very much important in order to rise to any top at all. So no wonder that we feel empty when all of our connections are weak and transactional. I will talk about it, or I have talked about it, I'll link it. But without the connections that we make to the people around us that are enriching the lives that we live, you absolutely cannot mean something to anyone at any point, and then you are worthless. Even for you. There's so much potential to be a great source of joy, inspiration, and love for those around you during your lifetime. Why would you throw that away by doing it all yourself? So back to expectations. That's when you try to follow the expectations. You are never able to reach them, and they are not meant to be reached, and they can often be contradictory. On the other hand, not following them at all in some degree makes you be an outcast. Others will feel uncomfortable around you. They might resent you or reject you. A mild form of this is when people bully you for being unique and interesting. At least that's what I've always been told, being the special snowflake. But generally speaking, it's true that people will feel uncomfortable when someone doesn't abide by the social norms. They're called social norms for a reason, like everyone looking at the elevator door when they're in an elevator and not all of a sudden staring right at the mirror. So you have this balance of, on the one hand, you shouldn't follow the social expectations because it's going to make you deeply unhappy and you should be aware of that. But also, if you completely ignore or go against the social expectations, people around you will feel uncomfortable, outcast you, and resent you. And again, as the Einzelganger, you're going to be a lot less happy. So you have this impossible balance. On the one hand, you are striving to be normal, even though normal doesn't exist. Shouldn't be a revelation. But on the other hand, you also cannot be too abnormal, because then people will think you're weird and cast you out. If it's all so impossible, why even bother? How can you ever get rid of this feeling of feeling worthless? Well, although there's no clear solution, I do have an idea that might help you along. So, getting rid of the idea of feeling worthless, I want to first emphasize again that blindly conforming to the crushing expectations of society and social norms is absolutely the worst option, because you won't find any meaning, and by conforming to them, you'll prove the world right that you actually are worthless. After all, if you take the color of your surroundings, you'll become invisible like a chameleon. In the same way, if you take your identity from the world, then you truly are no one. We all have our unique voices. We have our unique perspectives, our own lived experience, and therefore we have our own unique light to shine to the world. Sounds cheesy, bear with me. Imagine yourself being a lighthouse. If you shine your light bright and all around, ships will be able to find you, so other connections and people. If you dim your light or turn it off altogether, ships will get lost, they'll crash into the shore, they'll never actually find the coast, and then the point of view as a lighthouse truly has been defeated, so you are worthless. Just conforming to the world around you will make you lose your sense of self and the light you can shine. And in that way, you have effectively argued yourself out of existence. You have no reason to be here, as you are no longer a person. You have no meaning, and you are just an empty shell of a person, a husk, completely worthless to anyone. So the solution to feeling worthless actually lies somehow in non-conformity. There will always be a pressure to conform, as we've just talked about extensively. You will be weird to some people, and you're just gonna have to accept that. Not everyone will like you. And therefore, some people will not want to be around you. But there is no possibility of doing anything else, because conforming again is impossible and will make you empty and more worthless. So how do you go about this non-conformity, you ask? So then the point is to carve out your own path in life. Your path is unique to you. Sometimes you'll end up treading the beaten path, and sometimes you'll stray off the path. The selection of those paths is unique to you. In order to carve out your own path in life, I thought of two terms. On the one hand, you have selective resistance, and on the other, you have selective indifference. Systems being what they be, as we've talked about, you cannot completely avoid them. But you can start to experiment with the expectations you need to be aware of them, by sometimes challenging some of them. Think about the expectation of men to approach women. Well, it's brought a lot of anxiety for people, for men that don't dare approach women for the fear of rejection, and then they say that women have too high standards. But what if you have women, or you were a girl, and you all of a sudden start going after the men that you like by being quite vocal about it? There are gonna be people that are conservative, always gonna be not great, that just don't want that and would not even consider a relationship. Fine, that's information too, that's great. But lots of men are going to be really into it if you start to approach them instead. And therefore, lots of people will start looking up to you by you selectively breaking the expectation. Another example, as a man. You cannot avoid all the boxes because they will encompass all behavior, but I can do whatever I want with the contents of the box. So I want to be able to wear suits, which is more standard, but also be able to have guy and girl friends. I want to be able to be emotionally nurturing and supportive, but also be protective and assertive. Heck, I could even want to be a stay-at-home father if needed, and then cook and clean all the same, while also being proactive. I don't need to follow all the ideas that are within the gender role of a man, and sometimes you challenge them, and that might turn out well. And that's what selective resistance is all about. It's all about understanding the expectations that people will have of you, and then start selectively resisting, consciously picking and choosing the ones you like, and then discard the ones that don't make any sense, because odds are that other people will think they don't make sense too. And then we get to selective indifference. Selective indifference is therefore knowing about these expectations that are expected of you in society, knowing their boundaries, and therefore not only learning how you can see and love and accept yourself, you'll also be better equipped to face the pressures that society will put on you when you start, well, experimenting with the boundaries of these expectations. And that's the core of selective indifference. It's about not caring about the expectations of the outside world in the way that it makes you dictate the way you look at yourself and condition you loving yourself in the first place. You have to be selectively indifferent about these expectations and not let it determine your sense of self-worth. Because you are amazing. I know that you're watching this video. And that's where these two terms come together. On an individual level, you can be indifferent about the expectations of society all you want. But it doesn't really solve the problem of feeling worthless in and of itself. Therefore, you need to go further with selective resistance. As much as you cannot conform to all the pressures of society, you cannot challenge them either, because in both extremes, you'll lose your identity. In both cases in this sense. Think about a white man. It's an easy punching bag, but it's also something that many people understand. So if you're a white man and you are therefore conditioned to treat women a certain way and expect of them certain things, then you're just a tool of the system. You won't challenge the system, you might benefit from the system because we're living in a patriarchy or a system that just benefits masculinity more than femininity does. On the opposite side of the spectrum, if you just become a diehard feminist, you don't really weaken the system too. So if you decide to base your identity solely in opposition to a system, then, well, your identity will get consumed by the system. You'll become a tool just the same because you're giving it too much power and too much importance. Don't get me wrong, I consider myself somewhat of a feminist, but not every answer to every social problem lies within feminism, for example. So with selective resistance, to truly affect the system without getting too consumed by it, you have to start picking your battles. Because the immense amount of energy that it would take to just solely be in opposition to a system, it wouldn't really weaken the system and it's not worth it. Oh, I'm going to sound like a broken record. So where's the meaning? Well, the meaning lies in the bonds that we forge with one another. First, selective indifference helps you forge your own identity and truly embrace that. But then you have selective resistance that takes that further and takes that identity into the world around you, around the people that you love and the world that you can influence directly. Therefore, you make your brand of lovable weirdness that can help others really open up and be themselves too. So by first understanding the limits and the nonsense often of the systems that we live in, you can attack those systems where they are weak. And you can highlight those weak points to those around you. So selective indifference and then selective resistance. For example, attacking the toxic parts of masculinity is often best done as a man. By addressing, for example, that being emotionally closed off is a recipe for failure, and therefore results in emotionally stunted people that are usually hateful, unattractive, and underdeveloped. Better yet, you can be a role model to others by showing how it's done better. You can show what it is like to be good to others, to be loving and to be warm, and that is actually cool. To be emotionally available, to be communicative, and that vulnerability can mean strength. You selectively take the dumb parts of the systems, the struggles that you've had to overcome, and you highlight a better way. You really show people how it's done. And that will help other people open up, feel warm and open enough to actually try that out. And therefore, in a ripple effect, you start affecting the world around you and weaken the systems. And weaker systems mean less expectations and more room for you to be you and inevitably for others to be themselves. And that's it. You are never worthless, and you will never be worthless when you can continue spreading your warmth to others. I've talked about this, I will link it. Find what works for you, try things out, and communicate to learn and to understand. So you channel your weirdness in the right places to the people around you, and you will find immense love and meaning within that existence. I assure you. So with all those societal expectations gone out of the way, I will only actually leave you with one expectation, and that one's on the house. I hope you're always willing to be kind. I hope you're always willing to listen, to learn, and allow yourself to care about others and things bigger than yourself. And that you will start seeing your worth. On this path of yours, I hope you will find a way to live happily on your own path and to thrive with others. This will allow you to find meaning and love, and it will absolutely be a difficult road. And there will be times that you will do everything right, you will do everything in your power, and it will still fail. Nevertheless, I hope you won't give up, because on this path you will grow and learn and change and become truly the best version of yourself at any given time. You will learn more about yourself and about the world around you, which can only ever be good and helpful in beating more expectations and helping more other people to do the same. Slowly but surely, the thought of being worthless is not the first thing you'll think of when you wake up in the morning. It slowly will creep into the background. It will be the second thing, and then the third thing, and so on and so on. And slowly, you'll start to make way for better things and truly live up to the only expectation of you walking your path, doing the best you can, weakening the systems, and doing whatever you think is best, within reason. Hi, if you somehow managed to get to the end of the video, thank you. You are the best, simply the best, better than all the rest, which is something a wise philosopher once said. I hope you will like, comment, and subscribe to continue on the journey, and then answer me the question, what are some of the expectations that you have struggled with most personally? In the meantime, I will have a video link that you might find interesting, and I hope to see you there.